Welcome everyone, Costini here with a discussion about races in Total War Warhammer 3 that are the most likely to either be reworked or improved once Creative Assembly is finished with releasing Omens of Destruction DLC. I say most likely, but it's pretty much a guarantee that all of the races on this list are going to be affected one way or another. There's going to be some changes because Creative Assembly has pretty much talked about all of them one way or another. Exactly what they'll decide to do with these races, that is a different discussion, but you can expect, based on CA's own statements, for them to do something at the very least with these races. So starting off, we have Bretonnia. Now on a technical level, Bretonnia actually does work quite well as a race. They have a very powerful economy, they have the highest growth in the entire game potentially, even higher or at least on par with greenskins. That's because their main settlements provide a ridiculous level of growth in the game. By the way, this is a modded campaign to just speed everything up. They do have artillery, they do have flying cavalry, they do have range units, they do have a replenishment hero, they do have a melee hero, they do have magical users. So there's a lot of things that actually do work for Bretonnia on a technical level. From a practical level, however, there's also a lot of annoyances. Take for instance the research tree. There are some useful things, but the problem is, if you're playing Bretonnia, there's only two things you really care about. One is water pumps to give you extra peasants for every single region you control, because of the peasant economy system. And then there's also another research for Ponce. It's different than Lewin and others, but this also gives you extra peasants as well. Everything else is pretty much fluff. The entire research tree of Bretonnia just doesn't work quite very well. Then there's the discussion about the economy. Yes, Bretonnia can generate a lot of money, but what is annoying about them is you need to construct multiple buildings to achieve the same effect, or to just unlock buildings. And I find it annoying in general when you have to construct multiple buildings to get the same effect that you would see with other races. Yes, you might generate a lot more money than other races, though keep in mind the peasant economy aspect that you have to deal with. But the fact that you have to construct a water wheel in every single settlement to unlock the landed estate is not particularly great. Then there's the fact that there's a lot of stuff that does require a fairly high tier. The fact that foot squires, which in every single respect is a tier 3 unit, or even vastly inferior compared to many other infantry units that are in tier 3, like gas warriors would decimate them, great swords would win against them, so on and so forth. But the fact that these guys are a tier 4 unit also adds to this level of annoyance. And one of the ways to make infantry work in general Bretonnia, because infantry for Bretonnia and range units for Bretonnia aren't particularly great, one of the ways to make it work is to get an armory. But by the time you get a decent amount of armories to really make the system function, you've pretty much won the campaign because of the way the meta works in Warhammer 3. Bretonnia itself, as a portion of the campaign map, isn't particularly well designed. A lot of provinces that only have 2 regions in them, and honestly I think like some of these provinces, assuming they want to keep the map as it is, I think some of these provinces, like, you could fit in more settlements over here in Bretonnia, but I also think like some of these provinces should be merged to make them more useful on the campaign map. Also, it's pretty annoying, not just for Bretonnian factions, but also other factions that may want to conquer territory over there. Then the confederation mechanics of Bretonnia aren't particularly great. You do have a system of guaranteed confederation, unless you're playing Raponce, but you have a system guaranteed confederation, but because many of these minor factions, or all of these minor factions, are going to be wiped out pretty much for certain in a Bretonnian campaign, in reality you end up wasting your time researching stuff that's unimportant in order to be able to get access to the major factions. So there's a lot of systems that are outdated. The vow system as well. I understand it makes sense from a thematic standpoint for Bretonnia, but it adds to just a huge amount of freaking micromanagement, to the point that one of the things that's really good for you to do as a player is get a mod that literally unlocks these vows once you get to a certain level. But it also makes it annoying to recruit more armies as Bretonnia, because the upkeep you're going to be paying for knights, unless you have a mod that gives you a very high lord level to begin with. But it's going to make it so that when you're looking when you're looking to recruit multiple armies, even if you're not dealing with supply lines, you're going to end up having to pay a significant upkeep. So the money is there for an economy standpoint, but you end up realistically, because of the vow system, being quite limited in a lot of ways. So that is an issue. The fact that lords, heroes, and even the Green Knight don't have any kind of special skill lines is also annoying. And also the Green Knight is completely outdated as a hero. He doesn't have a special skill line. He doesn't really have anything on offer compared to that other characters would offer. Like, yes, he does give you one particular benefit or some benefits in battle and one particular benefit on the campaign map, but compared to what other legendary heroes like him have on offer, the Green Knight is certainly very, very outdated as a quote-unquote legendary hero. So I think like Bretonnia just needs an update to make more sense within the context of the Warhammer free meta, reduce the tier on certain things, and improve the research tree, maybe give players more peasants inherently to deal with, those kind of things, remove this vow system, or change the way the vow system works for characters. So don't force us to micromanage every single hero and every single lord with respect to that CA, because it does get very, very tedious very quickly. Though speaking about the vow system, I think it would be great if we had an upgrade system for knights. Like you could recruit knights errant in your campaign, and you could upgrade those all the way to Grail Knights if you get a certain amount of experience. Like we already have the Warband upgrade system. I think that would just make a lot of sense, at least for knights, to have a system to be able to upgrade your knights, because that's kind of quintessential to Bretonnia's aspect. So yeah. It's annoying having to, like, all your lords and heroes should not have to deal with this system of vows. Or if you want to keep them, make it so we're not having to, select to do this for every hero, every lord, and do various objectives. Because it ends up being pretty damn annoying very, very quickly in your campaign. I mean, sure, at the end of the campaign, it's pointless. The only thing you need is to worry about the Grail vow, but even then, like, just, having with every hero, every lord, having the moment you recruit them to unlock their vow, and then when they're finished with one vow, having to unlock another, and just that kind of micromanagement is frustrating. Like, that's the thing with Bretonnia. It's not a bad race in a lot of ways. In fact, in a lot of ways it works quite well, but just there's a lot of these tedious aspects that do ultimately add up and do negatively impact the enjoyment in a campaign. There's already mods that do vastly improve this experience, but yeah, I think some of those things at least should be made baseline. Next up, we have Slaanesh, and we know for certain that Creative Assembly is going to do a Slaanesh DLC. It would be weird if they had touched every single demonic race except Slaanesh in a DLC and not done anything for Slaanesh. So that is certainly going to happen. Now, weirdly enough, in a lot of ways, actually, Slaanesh does work. The campaign mechanics from an economy standpoint do work. Diplomatically, it does work. But the problems that Slaanesh has, well, let's just say that they're infuriating, to say the least. So one of the issues that does exist with Slaanesh is the lack of casualty replenishment, which is a fairly major problem, in particular as Slaanesh, because you're playing a glass cannon type race, where a lot of your units have low armor, low durability, take a lot of damage. It will be better with demonic reforging, I'm sure, but let me just say that I'm skeptical of that particular system working out as well, because as long as auto resolve is so intrinsically tied to armor and giving you a significant benefit when you have high armor units, the problem there becomes that you either get a bunch of battles where you're just having to fight them to reduce casualties even though you would obliterate your enemy with ease, or you end up doing what is a fairly natural outcome. Like, people will always seek the easiest option to win. And in the case of Slaanesh and demonic factions in general, and Warriors of Chaos, it is just inherently better if you're playing any of these races or factions to skip past a lot of or all of the demonic units and ultimately go for an army composition made up of chosen, previously cast warriors of Slaanesh, Forsaken of Slaanesh. Like, you would start with Forsaken at tier 2, because you do have a tier 2 settlement over here, so you can just get Forsaken of Slaanesh fairly quickly in your campaign. Then unlock Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh, and then get Chosen of Slaanesh, along with Chaos Knights of Slaanesh for cavalry. Let me say this bluntly. That is a very powerful army composition. It does work. It is also dull as dirt, because you're trivializing so many battles in the game, and that's kind of the problem of Slaanesh in a lot of ways. Like, Slaanesh is supposed to be a really interesting faction to play, and there are some interesting battles, at least early on in the campaign when you're conquering Ulthuan, but then you realize, like, it's nothing to it, because you just obliterate everything. Well, like, you just get Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh, and you just end up pretty much obliterating anything that might, stand in your way. Or you might get Spawn of Slaanesh. Don't want to say it's not worth getting Spawn of Slaanesh. Like, it's not worth getting any of the demonic units. So casualty replenishment and the issue of auto-resolve. Also, we can talk about, like, a lot of the research tree just being, fluff, pointless stuff that's not particularly great. We also got to talk about the issue of vassalization, because Slaanesh does have a significant level of power through forcefully vassally, through subjugation. But here's the problem with vassals in a campaign. Here's the significant issue in terms of vassals that we do have in a campaign. When you vassalize major factions, you're really trivializing the entire campaign. Sure, it sounds fun, and it is to an extent, to vassalize Elfarian, Alariel, Tyrion in a Slaaneshi campaign, but then you realize that there is no level of challenge that exists after that particular point in the campaign, because they will just literally obliterate anything you point them at. That is perhaps an inherent issue. Like, to be clear, one shouldn't ignore the fact that vassalization used to be a really shit system before Warhammer 3, and that the improvements that Creative Assembly have added have made it a better system. But it certainly has trivialized the game in a lot of ways. Like, vassals are unlikely to break that vassal agreement. You don't really have to manage it all that much. And honestly, even if you had to, it would just probably be really annoying to deal with. But at the same time, just like having a brutal early game, partly because you have very little casualty replenishment, your starting position, like, until you get access to Forsaken, and you have limited recruitment slots as well. That's kind of the annoying thing about Slaanesh. So it's research, recruitment slots, casualty replenishment, boring army compositions that are really effective, far more effective than other army compositions. Having armies that are made up of glass cannon units with little casualty replenishment is just a pain. Because, yeah, you might win battles easily enough when your army is at full strength, and you will. But then if you take any bit of damage, it just creates kind of dynamic in terms of battle playstyle that isn't particularly great. Because the problem with low casualty replenishment, the problem with auto-resolve is, one, it forces you to fight a lot of grinding battles. But on top of that, the way you're fighting battles, individually speaking, is you're doing so in such a way, and this has always been the case with Total War, even in Rome 1. Like, people talk about, like, oh, the recruitment system of Rome 1 and Medieval 2 used to be better. Yeah, they used to be in a lot of ways, and I still think they are, but there were certainly some issues with those systems, in the sense that players would gravitate towards playstyles where they would take very few casualties, and they always could. Some people want to pretend tactical battles were far more tactical in older Total War games. Yeah, I remember many people on, like, Total War Center posting screenshots of, like, oh, I have this army and I'm building these armies, and you should build these armies to take literally 0 losses in your campaigns. in campaign battles. And that's what people did. Range units, abusing terrain, all that. That was not a good playstyle. It still isn't a good playstyle. I think good battle playstyles are where you're incentivized to go out there and just fight the enemy properly, as opposed to just, corner camping and winning. Like, you can't eliminate corner camping, but it shouldn't be, one of the best ways. Now, for what it's worth, Slaanesh doesn't work like that. But then you end up in a problem. It's like, well, the best fucking thing you can do is abuse the shit out of the AI in other ways, or build an army composition that just like steamrolls the enemy with minimal casualties. Warriors of Chaos in particular. So yeah, there are certainly things that need to be improved with Slaanesh. And we know that things will be improved one way or another. At number 3, we have Kislev. And oh my, is Kislev broken. And broken in such a way that, unlike some other factions on this list, where you can look at mods and say, okay, this can fix it, this can fix it, Kislev genuinely breaks the game in a way that the best way to play it is to abuse and exploit the game mechanics. Now, you can always say, well, you can cheese with any faction. That is true. But it is one thing to be able to cheese. It is another thing for the cheese to be so overwhelmingly good, so much better than the default experience, that not doing it is like, it's kind of like cutting off your arm, more or less. Let me explain. Kislev has a good army roster, especially after Shadows of the Change and additions like things like Akshina, etc. Reality, though, you're not going to use most of it because you can't afford it. The one downside of the army roster is not having access to a tier 2 or even tier 3 artillery piece, which would be very welcome. I think like Little Grom should be tier 3, and we should get another artillery piece like a light artillery, just to really help us with walls. But that's really it in terms of our army roster. So special skill lines are lacking, so like Katrin's special skill line is genuinely one of the most pathetic in the game. And I'm not joking on this. You know who's a good magical user? Drazif. Do you know why Drazif is a good magical user? Because he gives you so many magical benefits that investing in magic as a lord, which is something I personally avoid because I don't think it's worth it. Like, I prefer using magic from heroes for the most part, but Drazif's magical capability is so excellent that you kind of screw yourself over not doing it. But here's, skill line issues, economy issues are one thing. The inherent flaw of Kislev has to do with the devotion system and the supporter system. Now, you might say Astankia doesn't have to deal with that, and clearly they start and move away from that. I think they should move away completely from it. The fact you can't gain devotion from Skaven, for instance, which, by the way, are chaos in the lore, chaos rats, is ridiculous. But here's the quintessential reason why Kislev needs an update, and they have said that they will update it, for the record, so it's not like, I'm just creating, some controversy for the hell of it. But here's the reason why Kislev is so ridiculously broken. So, if you're playing Kastaltin or Katrin, and people say, oh, Katrin's campaign is so great. It's not. It's genuinely one of the worst fucking campaigns of the game. Like, you want to know who has a better Kislev campaign? Boris Ursus has a Kislev campaign. Or if you want to, for whatever reason, deal with the supporter system, yeah, you have Kastaltin, who has, like, Frostholm for Frost Maiden capacity, Light War Sleds, Hero, and Lord Recruit rank, versus, like, oh, I can recruit Sargard at the same tier that I can regularly recruit Sargard. Or Ice Guard at the same tier, but oh, I can get Ice Guard with glaives at tier 4 as opposed to 5. Yeah, that's totally worth it as a landmark, as opposed to, oh, I can offer you Hero and Lord Recruit rank that you can't get anywhere else. It's not even funny. But here's where Kislev is broken. Let's say, I want to maximize supporters, which, by the way, is a victory condition, a short campaign victory condition, which is one of the reasons this is so broken. And short campaign victory conditions give you great effects for Kislev because you have limited hero capacity for, say, Frost Maidens early on in the campaign for much of the campaign. Well, here's where it gets ridiculously stupid. If we're talking about Kislev. So let's say, right? Let's say I trade this territory to Draika, right? And then trade some other territories as well, like Karak Ungor, for instance. Also trade that to Draika. And keep in mind, Draika is not necessarily, let's say, the most favorable lord to do this as. But let's say we do all of that. Let's say we trade a lot of things to Draika. Well, one of the things you can do, and the way to abuse this system is like you start trading regions. But when you trade a region like this to another race, it will not have a garrison in it. You can start putting one and one together. And since the Invocation of Ursun gives you supporters every time you occupy a settlement, then one of the best ways to play Kislev is look at the Empire, look at Draika, look at Azak, look at a Skaven, take a bunch of territories with, you know, tier 1 stuff in it, trade it away, declare war, and take it back without having to fucking fight the battle. Sure, the settlement level will be reduced, but the capability that you do have over here is ridiculous. Now, keep in mind, in this case, because I wasn't prepared, I didn't have lords in every single one of the settlements, I couldn't just, you know, give her this entire province and then take it back, so I am in a war with her. But if I had traded all of these regions to her, I actually could have not only taken these settlements, gained supporters in the process, by the way, gained supporters in the process, but also, stupidly enough, I could have even gotten a peace agreement with her on this turn. Because when you're doing that kind of region trade, settlement trade, and yes, this amount of the campaign, the mods have absolutely nothing to do with what I'm showing here. You can do this, and you can maximize your supporters in a couple of turns. So much for a campaign mechanic. And this is inherently better than, oh, I have to worry about always having enough devotion to keep the invocation up. You do the campaign faster. Literally, you trivialize the game. Now, you can say, well, you can do this as other races. You can do the region trading. You can abuse the race mechanic with garrisons. But you're not gaining one of the resources you need to literally win your campaign. That's not going to work over here. It will, however, work for Kislev. So it trivializes their campaign and makes one of their main systems that Creative Assembly put at the launch of Warhammer 3 in them, makes it completely trivial. On top of that, their economic potential, the cost of their buildings, the amount of money you're getting from buildings, it's just like so much abuse, so weak. So it's just like, this is one of the reasons why you want to abuse Kislev. Like, consider this. You may not have money to construct a lot of buildings as Kislev, so what do? Do you just, you know, play it slow? No, fuck that. Playing slow, why the hell would you do that? No, here's what you do. You go into a Realms of Chaos campaign. Yes, Realms of Chaos. As Atrin or Castalton, doesn't matter who you are, though Castalton can give you some benefits because you can recruit lower level Frost Maidens. Which, by the way, makes it cheaper for them to be loaded. And then you train with good traits. Like, for instance, this particular trait stacks. Yes, literally free buildings. This is why Kislev is broken. Like you can talk about a lot of things that are broken in this game, but there's few other races that are broken to this level. To this freaking level. Because then you can get a bunch of Ice Witches. You can use the load save character system to load these characters up that give you literally free recruitment, for instance, or lower recruitment, or a ton of growth, or a ton of control. Or you can just train, like training an Ice Witch normally, or a Frost Maiden normally in a regular campaign, is a really stupid idea. Like, that's the thing about Kislev. Like, every time you play them, if you play them as you should, you're playing them in the worst way possible. The best way to play Kislev is to abuse low save character, region trading, supporters devotion, and I can go on. Otherwise, you're just significantly slower and weaker than other races. But I'm not gonna say that this is a fun way of playing a campaign, because quite frankly, it is not. This is one of the reasons I actually detest. Like, I've played more Kislev campaigns before discovering this than pretty much any other race. The moment I realized, like, just how far down the rabbit hole it goes, and apparently the multiplayer community discovered this long ago. Like, when I first made a video on this, someone was like, oh, he's figured out the multiplayer meta finally. That's so stupid. I'm sorry, this is stupid. This is clearly not how the game is meant to be played. And you can, again, you can talk about cheese, but I'll be honest, this is the most broken, ridiculous bullshit, and it is specific to Kislev because of their mechanics. This is why Kislev needs a rework, and yeah, like, basically the Ice Court, throw out the window. Like, just let us train lords and heroes instantly for a cost, and let us select the traits we want, and prevent trait stacking to prevent us from just getting, like, free construction. Make construction, reduce construction costs. Change, like, there's so many things that Shadows of Change should have done. This is one of the reasons SOC is so shit. It's because, like, oh, you know, SOC is better than that they added unit. I couldn't give a damn about any of the units SOC did add. That was never the problem. I mean, I do care that Cafe didn't get a replenishment hero. To be sure, I care that Tzeentch didn't necessarily get... Well, Tzeentch actually got good units, but Kairos is still crap. So, you know, campaign mechanics matter. Alright, and keep in mind, as bad as Kislev is, it is still not the highest priority on this list. Holy shit, is it not the highest priority. It may be the most broken from, like, an exploit standpoint, but at least it can function from a military as a race from certain perspectives. Other races can't really even do that. And number 2, Norsca, of course. And they have specifically mentioned Norsca, just like they specifically mentioned Kislev. You look at Norsca, holy shit, this is not just a faction that needs a rework. This is a faction that needs, like, just completely removed from the game and built up again from the ground up. Like, consider this. This is a race that has one lord choice that doesn't have a melee skill. You get the choice over here of one skill for one particular god, and that's it. That is your skill line for Norsca. I mean, you can ride a war mammoth, that is certainly really powerful, but holy shit, is this bad. That's just leading your army situation. Your economy is weak and has always been weak, but they even nerfed it because we want to focus on naval aggression. Then that doesn't work because ports, between the fact that Norsca... Ports are expensive to build, maintain, and Norsca relies a lot on looting and sacking settlements. It creates a bad dynamic. Monster hunts. Also the fact that you need to raise settlements as Norsca in order to win your campaign. Yes, because you do need to attain that certain allegiance with a particular god. The fact that you have this gameplay loop of raising settlement... sacking a settlement one turn, then raising it the next turn to increase allegiance, then occupying it after you raise it is also pretty terrible. The research tree, geez, what a bunch of fluff, pointless fluff as well, because, yeah, totally, I am going to go get Drakenhof as Norsca. Absolutely, I'm going to waste my time. Or travel to Black Crag. Those kind of things just feels completely... pointless fluff. Like, I'm not sure, like, Norsca was designed as a Warhammer 1 race. They were already outdated in Warhammer 2, and now they're easily one of the worst races in the game to actually play. Army roster is limited, recruitment is annoying, getting heroes, lords, every possible issue you can think of with regards to a race Norsca has it. I mean, it's not the worst climate in the world. I guess that's the one thing Norsca does have. They have climate going for them, which is actually a bigger deal than I might make it out to be, but that's it. That's the only thing Norsca has going for it that has a better climate than most other races in the game. That is it. And weird that they don't have ocean for a naval supremacy faction, quote unquote. Finally, we have the Vampire Coast. Now, I've talked about the many issues that the Vampire Coast has, from the campaign gameplay to the battle situation, their weak army roster, so on and so forth. Though it has started to get better in quite a few ways, I think. Like, I think Creative Assembly has started to be aware that, yes, there are issues and they do need to fix this particular race. But instead of talking about the issues that the Vampire Coast has, it's kind of in a similar vein with Norsca, though it's actually worse than Norsca. Norsca at least has some really good melee units, and they do work. Like, you can make Norscan armies work on the campaign. It's just dealing with everything else that's the problem. With the Vampire Coast, you don't even have a great army necessarily, or you do have good units, but good luck affording them. Here's the thing, though. Why do I expect Vampire Coast to be updated? Even though I believe this is the only race on this list that Creative Assembly has not stated. Like with Slaanesh, you can argue, well, they didn't state that they were going to do something with Slaanesh, except that they were going to do a DLC for Slaanesh, and that was very much expected. They then decided to do Khorne first. But still, with the Vampire Coast, the reason I'd expect Vampire Coast is that the person now in charge of handling racial improvements outside of DLC, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the principal designers behind the Vampire Coast. So I would expect an update for them. Like back when they came out in Warhammer 2, very different situation, worked quite well. But now in Warhammer 3, the meta has shifted, the game has changed, and they've just been left behind in a substantial number of ways. So they absolutely need an update. Hopefully they will get it, considering who's working right now on that. I think you can really feel some of the changes that went in terms of the people working on Warhammer 3 as opposed to Warhammer 2. You can also certainly feel that the people who originally made Warhammer 3, let's just say they didn't necessarily make the very best decisions in the series of Total War. That is changing at the moment. There's been significant personnel changes within Creative Assembly as of late. Like, at least a lot of people have been removed from the company after, well, the triple disaster of Pharaoh, Shadows of Change, and in particular Hyenas. Holy shit, that was, like, if not for Concord, I'm not joking, like, Concord has proven that, yes, it can always get worse, but understand Hyenas was the biggest gaming disaster since E.T., in terms of, like, flushing money down the toilet and a game not even selling. Like, Concord lost more money overall, but damn, Hyenas is certainly, like, still number 3 in terms of disaster. So yeah, Creative Assembly hopefully has learned their lessons, and they do seem to be moving in a much better direction as a company right now. We'll see how things pan out. Costine signing out. Stay tuned for more.